Hello, hello. Welcome, welcome. It is me, once again, back from the realm of the dead, back here in the realm of the, not quite as dead, but still pretty dead. Yeah, you know what this is. We're back to Art Gripes. So, in this particular episode, and it's going to require some modicum of explanation, I will be drawing a Kobold Druid, who is an original character. Do not steal. And this is a character that I'm going to be using in a D&D campaign that will be run privately, I think, in July. But that part of it is not really that important. What is actually important is that this kobold be as sexy as possible. Very important. Okay, so for the purposes of this video, the actual drawing is not going to be quite as important. It'll be a cute little drawing, don't you worry, they're always cute little drawings. But the actual thing that I'm going to be talking about is sort of my loose experience with D&D and how I focused on creating the character itself, like the personality, the general sentiments that I used in approach, things like that. I felt like that's a little bit more important than the actual drawing itself. But for the time being, just to go over the primary real fast, the things that I was trying to aim for were, let's see, trying to make a cute kobold that had a big round ass. And that's it. That's the whole thing. So, now that you have that in your head, let us proceed. Okay, so, backstory. Recently... Gosh, this is going to be... Okay, recently I've been trying to expand my network of friends. And to that end, someone that I've known for quite some time invited me into a Discord that had other future friends, I guess. And one of the things that they do there is play D&D. And D&D is something that I've always known of, and I have a very loose association with, but I've never actually done it myself. Not specifically D&D, not Dungeons & Dragons, but Tabletop, in other words. Because, as some of you probably know, I used to frequent the traditional games board on 4chan ages and ages and ages ago. I'm the one that created the whole Commissar Fucklaw thing. I engaged with the Angry Marines nonsense, a lot of 40k stuff on TG back in the day. I'm very aware of a lot of old pastas from that era, so forth, things like that. I've referenced it before, no need to get into it. But point being, I'm very keenly aware of the general approach that you have whenever you go into tabletop games. But I've never done it. Okay, so. If I pause, I'm drinking. Okay. Yay. So, I decided, you know what? This normally is not something that in the past I would have done, just because I'd be like, yeah, it'll be a thing, and I have work to do. But recently I've been trying to change my approach to life, because I don't want to go through life just trying to get work done and, just not do anything, because that's been historically my problem. Not to go into it, but grew up poor, disenfranchised from things, have spent most of my life recovering from that. Haven't really done anything. I have never gone on a vacation. I've never really traveled. Most of my positive life experiences have been very small encounters, just things like that. So, to that end, I've been trying to improve my life by actually being more aggressive about pursuing life, I suppose. So, to that end, that's the reason why I started up this idea of maybe I should go through with this D&D thing. Just for that, because it's just a small step, right? And it'll help me to meet new people and so forth and so on. And wouldn't that be nice? Yes. And from what I understand, it actually is a fairly good way to meet new people and to be able to expand your range of interests and things like that. Because if you're looking to expand your own network of friends, or to meet a significant other, or so forth and so on, any range of possibilities. Not that I'm suggesting that you're going to do it through D&D necessarily, but you do that by meeting enough new people and making friends that you're able to expand your network of friends, because they will know people that are... The people that you like will also know people that they like, which means that probably you're going to like the people that they like, because you are just similar enough, if you've made good decisions about how you've chosen your friends, that you'll be able to just keep expanding that circle outward, right? And that's how you meet new people. And all the people that I know that are married or have extremely good friends, or, anything that's important to them from an interpersonal standpoint, their story always seems to be the same, in that they were introduced by someone that they knew, or they ran into them at a party, or, something like that. Even my parents, not that they had the most successful marriage ever, but even my parents did meet in that way, if I recall correctly. My mother was introduced to my father by a friend, and that's how that went down. So, that's sort of the key to all interpersonal relationships, for the most part. And it's also the key to business, is it's who you know, right? And that's not just a nepotism thing, that's just how people work. If we know someone and we like them, we want them to succeed. And if we know that another person has a similar personality or whatever, then we would naturally like to combine those things, especially because it's cool to do so, and it's really not more complicated than that. And that's really all there is to it, right? Right. So, D&D, you're going to meet people that you haven't met before. This really goes for really any intersocial hobby that you have. Anything that will lead you to have a core group of people that you really like, that also involves sort of interacting with other people, is a great way to expand your interests and grow as a person. And that's something that I would recommend anyone that's in their teens or 20s to do. And I'm doing it here in my 30s, which is not ideal, but it is still effective, and will continue to be effective probably until you're an old fart playing chess outside like a living stereotype, complaining about the weather, or whatever it is that old people do. I don't know. Who cares? No, just kidding. But yeah, that's the mentality to all these things. I mentioned all these things specifically. I mentioned all these things specifically because the character herself, my little kobold here, does also sort of relate to that in her own way. Okay, the campaign in question is not really going to be a campaign, it's going to be a one-off, is how I've had it explained to me. Which means that this is going to be a very short session, probably 2 hours, maybe 2 sessions, so 4 hours at most, probably. From what I gather. Although I kind of suspect it's probably going to go longer than that. Especially if I'm involved, because I ask way too many questions. However, in true me fashion, whenever creating the character, I have been asking tons of questions about the character and the lore surrounding the environment and how the setting works and so forth and so on. That's how I am. I remember whenever I was learning to work line back in my mid-20s, doing plastic injection molding, they wanted to be like, okay, here's the thing, here's the machine, this is how you do the thing, and they wanted the training to be like 2 minutes long when they demonstrated how to do it, and then just walk away. But instead, I held them there and asked them every single question that I could think of about the machine and its operation and what to do whenever something happens, blah, blah, blah. And I remember them getting kind of pissed off about that, but that's just what my personality is. I like having as much information as possible, and I love exploring possibilities. And I mentioned that because that's one of the first things that I did whenever I started creating a character. Because I thought, what do I want my first experience with Tabletop to be? And I didn't want it to be something brain dead. I wanted it to be something that I could try to pack as much creativity into a short amount of time as possible. So to that end, I decided I would like to be able to approach solving as many situations as possible in this campaign, because I don't know how much of it is going to be combat. I don't know how much of it is going to be puzzles. It doesn't matter. So I wanted there to be enough utility that I could just try to do many different things. So I looked through all the lists of what all the classes do, and one of the first things that actually came to my mind was the idea of... I created this sort of scenario in my head in which I needed to get past a bunch of guards, like in a cave or a building or something. And I imagined to myself, what would be a creative way of actually getting around this problem? And I thought, what if I could turn into a cat and just walk right up to them, pass by them, or turn into a mouse and just scurry along the floor and just not be seen, that sort of thing. So I think I can't remember, but I think that I asked, and I wanted to know what class would allow me to do something like that, and the answer was Druid, because Druids can change their shape. So that's what immediately attracted me to the idea of being Druid. The plant-hugging part of it was not really something I was too concerned about. I do like plants and wildlife, though. So, kind of a bonus, little bitty baby bonus. So, I kind of hardline established, yes, I want to be a Druid. Because not many of the other things really sounded to be as creative to me. Like, if you're going to be, I don't know, a barbarian or some sort of sorcerer, I don't remember all the classes or anything, or something like that, then that seems a bit too straightforward to me. So, I like the idea of a Druid. And then after that, I decided that I needed to, of course, pick a race. And me being me, I wanted to know what races combine well with that. Like, typically you can do anything. Like, some people will even make characters that are kind of considered to be unaligned, or not misaligned to their race or their job. I don't know a good example of this for D&D, but let's say that you are a sailor and you're playing a race that can't swim for whatever reason. That would be an example of this, where they're obviously going out of their way to make it as difficult as they can on themselves, because that's the point. They're role-playing. And that's a lot of the appeal of doing this sort of thing, is that you're actually sort of theatrically acting in a way that takes you out of your typical safe space and you can be that person. That sort of thing. I'm not going to be that aggressive on my first time out, but you get the idea. So I started thinking, the way that Druids work, as far as my understanding, and I'm not an expert in D&D, so I wasn't really sure, but the way that they seem to work is whenever they change their shape and they turn into an animal, which I assume I'm going to be doing quite a bit, I might not, I never know, then they lose access to their first three stats, which are all physical, like, actually I should bring that up, like strength and, no, not that one. Not that one either. Where's the thing that here it is. Okay, the ones that I ended up going with is focusing on intelligence, wisdom, and whatever the other thing is. Actually, give me a second. I'm humming a little song so you won't notice, and I have no idea what I'm doing right now. Okay, strength, dexterity, and constitution. Those are the ones that get dropped whenever you turn into an animal. And your sheet will then just look at whatever the stats for that animal happen to be instead of looking at yours. So I thought, there's no real reason for me to invest too much into these things unless I get caught off guard or, it's something like that. So instead I decided to focus on intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. And I started looking at what races can combine with being a druid in a way that their racial bonuses will combine with what the druid does. Because most racial bonuses are physical. Like, they will help with you attacking something in some way, or something of that nature. But since that's not really a factor, like, for example, if I wanted to be a race that can fly, like there's a race of owls, you can be an owl. and I consider that for a moment. But if I go from being an owl into being, a mouse, then I can't fly. There's no bonus to being that. You're changing your shape either way. And the same thing applies to most other racial traits. So I thought, what in the world would combine in such a way that you can unite these two things at the same time? And I realized all these things are going to be related to the mind in some way, for the most part. So I started looking at that, and there were several options. I can't remember quite what all of them are. One of them was a ghost-wise halfling, I think. And another was a water gins something. I can't quite remember off the top of my head. But yes, both of those were actually I can just find the damn thing. I'm going to find it. Can't stop me. A Ganassi, that's what it was. A Ganassi. It was a water Ganassi. And both of these actually have sort of a telepathic ability of some sort. Actually, I take that back. No. What was the other one? I can't remember. One of them was the Ghostwise Halfling. And there was another one that had a telepathic ability. It doesn't actually matter. I think actually it might be a tiefling of some sort. There's lots of sub-races to some of these things. But anyways, point being is there were like 3 different ones that have telepathic abilities, and I thought, well, that would be kind of useful to be able to turn into like a mouse or a cat, go spy on someone, and then be able to, project information back into someone else in the party's head without actually anyone being the wiser. I thought that'd be pretty cool. But another option was the lion ones, Leonin. They have a roar ability, and I was kind of joking, it would be funny if I turned into, like a little sugar glider or something, and I use my racial roar ability, because it doesn't really specify anything about how big you have to be. It just specifies that you can use it. And I thought it'd be funny if this little bitty thing was like, and the sheer terror of this thing's roar actually did manage to succeed to break the will of someone. And I decided to keep looking. But I did eventually realize that using 5e.tools, which is a website that is very useful for this sort of thing, I discovered that there were actually 2 different kinds of kobolds now. Because there is the old one, which used pack tactics, which apparently was strong enough that they wanted to get rid of it. And there is the new one that uses Draconic Cry, which functions in a very, very similar way, but it has a little bit more limitations. And you also get... you don't have to worry about sunlight, for example. The rules changed. So there's another player that is going to be playing with us that actually is using a older version of Kobold. And I thought I was interested in this like scream ability, and this newer version of the Kobold actually has it. And I thought it would be kind of interesting from a storytelling perspective if we actually had 2 kobolds in the party, but they were slightly different in some way. So that's where this idea came from. And I mention this specifically just because, again, I'm concentrating more on the storytelling aspect as opposed to anything else. So I went with that idea, came up with this idea of a druidic kobold using the new rule set, and And I started looking at the spell list of what all the things that they could do happen to be, and one of the reasons why I mentioned the Water Genasi, was it? Yes, Water Genasi, is because they have an ability called Shape Water, and I thought it would be interesting if I could use Shape Water in order to, like, make an ice key in order to unlock a door, something like that. You could use it to shape pretty much anything. But I did notice that you can just get that right away. It doesn't have to be a racial thing. So that's the reason why I shifted away from that. But I started looking at all the different spells, and I decided that it would be interesting because we don't have a ranged attacker, and we didn't have a healer. And even though they were very adamant, no, you don't have to base your thing around the fact that we don't have this, I thought, yeah, but I also kind of want to anyways. So I ended up kind of more focusing on that aspect of it. So, I'm trying to think back to my line of thought. I've been going through a lot of this lately. So, after I sort of nailed that down, that's whenever the personality element started coming in. Because I thought, if this is a kobold that is focusing on support, how would that actually translate into what their race is like? And you don't have to stick to this stuff, but there are recommendations for how the different races might think. And you guys have heard me kind of complain about this before, but whenever you're designing a race for your setting, don't say everyone that is part of this race believes the same thing, thinks the same thing, looks exactly the same. Like, there needs to be enough variability within how you can flex your setting that people can interpret it in different ways and take their own approach. It's pretty easy to be like, no, this is my idea, I want it to be this way. But it definitely harms the long-term approach to how people use your universe. So D&D's fairly good about this. I'm not going to go into the particulars of how D&D works because I'm not exactly sure, but apparently there's space. You can sail on a ship through space and get to completely different worlds that are almost exactly similar to one another. It's a bit of a mess, but let's not worry about it for now. The kobold I did decide to sort of use some of the more rigid ways of looking at kobolds. Typically, they don't live very long, but supposedly they do have the ability to live up to 120 years. But the problem is that they just don't typically have that happen because they're kobolds. They die in droves. They're kind of weak. People don't generally like them too much. They are usually not amazingly smart. But, that be how it do, I guess. Let's see, what was I thinking? My brain is, like, going 30 miles per hour right now, which is kind of fast, but also slow enough that I'm like, exactly that. So, I decided, and that's what it, another aspect of kobolds is that they are not particularly attached to life in the sense of they all enjoy sort of living life to the fullest that they can, but at the same time, whenever someone dies, they're very detached from it, because other kobolds, they die all the time, so it's almost completely meaningless. And they also, as a result of this, believe in this concept of instant reincarnation, that if someone dies, then they just immediately pop back into the real world as someone else. So their religious beliefs, if you can call it that, their societal beliefs, guide them to this coping mechanism of approaching the death of people that they care about as not being as big of a deal as it would be to most other races. So they're very detached in that way. So I decided to include that inside of her personality. So the more I thought about it, the more I started liking this idea of, because this has also been important to me lately, of this very compassionate, uplifting, helpful, like positive and upbeat kobold lady that is also sort of strangely detached from actually caring about the people that she's caring for, in a sense. The way that I've sort of described it is she will do absolutely everything in her power to ensure that everyone around her stays alive and is happy and enjoying life, but will kind of quickly throw you under the bus if she feels that her own life is in danger, like she's not going to sacrifice herself, or that, and that she, if you die in the process of her trying to help you, she's not going to be too shook up about it. Which, if with interacting with other races, I'm sure is a source of conflict with anyone else that she would run across. Because she would purport to care a lot about the well-being of the people that she's with, but at the same time, she puts herself first, and she is not going to be broken up if she happens to fail. In that same respect, I thought it'd be interesting if she in fact is a mother, and has actually had a bunch of kids, but in kobold fashion, she kind of just does her business, lays the egg or whatever, and takes off. And you guys know me, I love suspicious eggs. It's hilarious. But yeah, she, like, has kids, leaves them, and in one or two cases maybe has raised one for a couple of years, has named a few of them, but with most of them, she has no idea if they ever hatched. In some cases, maybe she laid an egg and just left it, didn't care if it hatched at all. Basically viewing it like a lizard. You know, she doesn't care. It's just how kobolds are. So if she were to even run across one of her kids from another pairing or something, then she probably wouldn't care, and the kid probably wouldn't care either. It wouldn't be a big deal. And again, this more just trying to explore her character and how her character works with other characters. Because whenever you're writing a story, that's kind of one of the things that's going to be the most important, is figuring out, let's see, whenever you're writing a story, if it's a typical story like a novel, or a short story or whatever, then the main point you're going to be making is going to be your central theme, and your characters exist to fulfill that theme. So if you're writing a story that is about trust, for example, you might have a character that puts absolute trust in someone to the point that it actually harms them. And then you might have another character that doesn't trust anyone at all. And then you might have a third character that puts their trust only in people that are similar to themselves. You know, just things that iterate on the same thing. And then you have them enter into conflict with one another to explore the approach to trust and what that means to all the characters and what it might mean to the reader and the writer. And as I've mentioned before, if you aren't learning whenever you're writing, then you're probably not writing correctly. Because writing is as much about exploring yourself and your own ideas and trying to figure those out as it is about trying to teach other people. If you're writing for the exclusive purpose of trying to lecture to other people, then you're probably not going to do too well. If it's something that you yourself are sort of certain about, but you're still trying to explore, then that's probably the best path to take. But anyways. Point being is, whenever you're having characters interact like this is probably the most important part of it, is creating enough likability that you actually care for the characters in some way, even if they are villains, but also having enough inherent conflict in their personalities that it will lead them to actually discussing whatever the themes happen to be. And when it comes to tabletop is way more... It's more loosey-goosey, and you don't really write that way. You're not writing a novel, and that's part of my problem with tabletop so far has been I take that approach of I need to know everything. I need to make sure that everything interconnects because that's just how you write a novel, and that's what I'm used to. But in this sort of D&D campaign where it's only going to last maybe 2 to 4 hours, then obviously that's not going to work. So being as loose as possible is not really as important. But I do still think that character approach is true. Of making sure that everyone can like each other but still have conflicts. I feel like that's probably key in most stories. Most stories that I can think of where I think that they're excellent do sort of stem from that same mentality. Okay, but anyways. So that's sort of her character. She... Also, something I sort of decided upon is the idea that she probably in the past has been way more trusting, but her backstory that I've come across in terms of how we're starting the campaign is that she... Because this is another thing that you have to sort of come up with. You have to pick what your character backstory is, and you get bonuses from that as well. So she came from a mercenary unit, which apparently are very small in this setting, about 4 to 8 people typically. And at some point, I've decided she's going to be like the last survivor of it, and she's on the run from someone. The details are not really important, but consequently, she's gone from being pretty trusting and not really naive, but just way more open, to now she's afraid for her own life, and she is hesitant to talk to anyone or to trust anyone or to open up about anything. And also, in pertinence to her character, as far as this whole showing care for people, but ultimately not caring if they die, that sort of idea, I have decided that it would be interesting if the idea that someone would actually genuinely like care and love her in some way, I'm not sure if this would ever even come up, but this is just something that I think about. That would probably be something that would legitimately like kind of spook and like kind of scare her in some way, because that's not how kobolds think. Like they're very impulse driven, and they have very short lives in which they don't have much time to actually learn about the world around them. But with her, I decided that she would probably be in her mid-20s. I rolled for her stats, and she has a 20 in wisdom. So the approach I'm going to be having is that she has very high wisdom, pretty damn high charisma. So most of her deal is going to be convincing others of things. So she's very good at helping others through their problems whenever it comes to her koboldy ways. Someone that actually sort of penetrates the stone heart of a kobold would probably kind of scare her for that reason, if that makes any sense. And that's something that I would like to explore in some way. Although how that would come up organically, I have no idea. Because presumably she's never really cared about anyone in the same way that you or I would sort of in our human ways care about people. And she can't run into someone from her past, and there's not enough time for her to develop a real authentic relationship with someone. So I guess she would have to encounter someone else that is in a more authentic, genuine relationship. And be able to see it and just react against it. That'd probably be the best way of handling it. I also wanted her to be blue because blue is pretty. And the color theory of it was, I figured if she's going to be covered in plants, one, I want most of her color to be a neutral tone so that it would pair with anything. That's the reason why there's so much tan and black and white. And I knew that there was going to be a lot of green. So I figured her skin would need to either be probably red as an accent color, or it would need to be blue in order to be able to be paired with green, so she looks sort of green, but is not so green that it overpowers the color palette. So, there you go. Also, the hummingbird is not a plot point. I just wanted something to be there, so it's a hummingbird now. It's pretty. Can't take it. Get out of the kitchen or something. Okay. What else? Oh, yeah. The other kobold player stole my idea as making them a sailor. No, I was looking up things that would give me the bonuses that I want. One of them was a sailor, because they had the right stats that come with it. But I didn't really want her to be a sailor or anything like that. It turned out that there are sky sailors, in a sense, in this setting. So I could have served on an airship, but I decided against it, because I like the idea of her having this mercenary unit background a little bit more. So, whenever I run into this other kobold, I kind of... Because the way the airships supposedly work in this setting is that they run off of some sort of a tree that grows on the airship itself, even though the airships can be as small as like I don't know, like a chariot or something, like something that's one person sized, and they come no bigger than something that's about the size of an RV, and that's it. But I figured she's probably never, if she's ever seen one, she's just seen it from the ground looking up, and she's certainly never been on one, and she doesn't know anything about them. But the moment that she probably learns that they're powered by these trees, and since she's a druid, I figured, oh, that would be a cool little interaction. And having it be another kobold telling her this probably would also be interesting. So I'll look forward to that. The other kobold player also coincidentally rolled a 10 for their dick size, so I decided to roll my own d10 for quality, her own quality, and I also got a 10, so we're going to be a couple little hot pockets is what we're going to be. Hell yeah. Okay, hot pocket sounds really gross in this context. Okay, so as far as her like ambitions now, kobolds, even if they have 20 wisdom, probably have very, very simple ambitions. They probably just want to have lots of disposable kids, enjoy life, probably get wasted, get shit-faced, have a bunch of adventures, probably be a little bit reckless. I kind of look at it from an evolutionary perspective, I guess. Like, what would be successful in a race like this? And that kind of comes down to a little bit of recklessness in addition to a lot of sleeping around and that sort of thing. Especially if they don't care for their children actively most of the time, then that would also make sense. So, in addition to her being who she is, she probably also is a little bit of a party animal. But although since she's in her mid-20s, I imagine that she's probably reined it in some, and she's a little bit wiser about how she does things, and she really doesn't like the idea of getting so shit-faced that she puts herself in danger or something like that. Especially now that she feels like her life is in the most immediate like danger that it's ever been in. She probably is especially paranoid of such things, and might even move away from her party animal days and become way more reserved. Maybe. But if someone manages to convince her in the right circumstance, I imagine she probably would, indeed, get shit-faced. I don't have a story about her hat. I just wanted her to have a big, cute hat. And I knew in the past that people do wear, in some parts of the world, these big lotus leaf hats. So that's what that's based off of, if you want to look up pictures of those. I mainly just knew that I didn't want her to... In her physical design, I wanted her to look kind of soft and caring and sort of cuddly in a way. And as a result, I didn't want her to have a bunch of spines and stuff all over her face. Also, I wanted her to look very feminine, in a sense. So to that end, I decided, well, it's kind of hard to pull that off with a bald kobold. So I thought a good way of handling that problem would be to hang something off of her head, like to drape it over, so that it sort of has that visual silhouette that humans associate with femininity, which would be hair. And the best way of doing that would be a big ol' flowery little hat. So that's where that idea came from. So I guess another sort of important way to look at this would be what would, like, as far as like role-playing and everything goes, like if this character could make the world whatever she wanted it to be, what would it be like? Like, what would their ideal life be if they did not have any troubles? And as a 20-something-year-old kobold with 20 wisdom, which, by the way, 20 wisdom is, that's as much wisdom as you can have. I guess without, like, some sort of magical artifacts or something that raise it even further. I think that's as high as it normally gets. Unless you can... I don't know, I can't say anything about it. But anyways, she probably is very aware of the fact that she is impulse-driven, as are most of her people. So when it comes to her having an ideal world, I imagine that it probably would just come down to serving her impulses again. But that might change as she goes through whatever adventure that she's going to go through. Because in the past, before all this happened, before she started getting stalked by this world government and being sought for reasons that she doesn't really understand, she probably just wanted to go about her business and she may have even have thought that her life has been over at this point. Because kobolds mature by age 6, and they typically don't live too much longer past that, and she's well above that age, and so she kind of probably feels like she's on borrowed time as it is. So up until that point, she probably just wanted to keep doing what she was doing, just partying, having random kids that she's leaving in ditches somewhere, or whatever kobolds do, and just doing that until she eventually, in her eyes, gets killed by something, which would probably happen with her mercenary work. She probably doesn't have much money because she wastes all of it as soon as she gets it. Because that seems very koboldy. Although I imagine she probably has some sort of lump sum of something somewhere. Probably. Although since she's on the run, I can't imagine she has the ability to access whatever happens to be. So, here we go, final picture. So imagine once her little adventure is over, maybe she goes through some sort of change. Given all the character ideas that I've come up with for her so far, she probably will eventually maybe take on a bit more human characteristic and learn to sort of value a still life of caring about the people that are around her in a way that's more permanent than her race would let on. So actually caring about people legitimately and even mourning their death whenever it actually happens instead of just letting it go. Something like that. I think that'd be a good approach. Okay, so there you go. I wanted to go over all that because I wanted to show what my thought process was in approaching my very first tabletop experience. Whether it'll go well or not, I have no idea. I'm sure that it will come across lots of hardships. One of the reasons why I wanted her to be wise but not informed is because since I don't know anything about the setting and I don't know anything about the rules, I thought it would be a good reflection of myself. Of not really understanding what I'm doing, but still having the wherewithal to be able to interpret what I was coming across, I think. Something like that. So, for you guys, I hope that you also can expand the range of your own personal experiences and be able to get to know new people and maybe even do something like this where you explore different ways of creating worlds and characters for you to interact with. In the past, I wanted to do the scary lessons thing, if you remember that, like a few years ago. And I actually, if you guys remember, was starting on a game, but I only got like one chapter or so in because it was just so time intensive. I discovered that there's just no way that I could get across and do all of it in one sitting. It would just take years. However, if I tried to run that as a tabletop experience instead and acted as a DM sometime in the far future, I could probably actually get that story up relatively quickly, because there is less to worry about. Like, I don't have to make art assets, I don't have to worry about scripting, I don't have to worry about RenP, all that stuff just goes out the window. The only thing I would really need to figure out is what system to use and be able to figure out how to run it in the first place. So, you guys get the idea. That's a healthy way to grow. I'm getting older, just like my little druid here, who, by the way, her name is Tintuna, although it's spelled Tyn, and her last name is spelled Tyner, which are Welsh words. If you want to look those up, feel free. One of them might translate as a pun, but it's actually more like being closely held. So even her name is supposed to evoke this sense of one or two little sexual jokes, but at the same time, more just care and love and that sort of thing. So, that is my message to you, I guess, is just try to grow and try to develop into new forms that you did not expect. That's what life is all about. It's not about trying to get a house and to have a kid and then die with people around you or anything like that. You only get one life, and a lot of it is going to come down to just having adventures in various ways, even if they're very minor ones. Even if you're an introvert like me. They don't necessarily have to be flying to Paris or any sort of nonsense like that. Adventures can be as simple or as grand as you want to make them, as long as you have the opportunity and the gumption to be able to choose to have them. So, see you guys in the future, okay? Please treat one another well and treat yourself even better. But then after that, treat others as you would treat yourself, and then maybe we'll all benefit. See you guys next time. Have a good day. Bye-bye.